Now, I've got to ask you something related to both of you, to Russell Brand. I want to leave all those allegations for the criminal justice system in the UK. But what about this notion of addiction to sex addiction? Is it a reality? And how do you know you got it?
Yeah, I mean, it is now put forward as an addiction, as you know, in terms of dopamine levels and being absolutely interfering with functioning. And so, like gambling, like, you know, we know porn addiction, huge problem. And so, yeah, sex addiction, I don't know if...
It's not a formal category. Like, it's not a formal category.
Yeah, it's an addiction that maintains the survival of the species.
Yeah.
True.
I think the argument is there's a set of people that are super impulsive. This is the way they feel. Some level of connection, and it reaches a pathological level that it causes all this damage.
Isn't that an excuse?
It can be, absolutely.
Rather than a condition, it's an
I think it's more, it's usually underneath it is some sort of personality disorder or something else. So that in itself as the addiction is highly contested. So in Russell Brand's case, I mean, I think he was basically, he was out there, like he was hardly hiding it. Like he was basically someone who loved women and women loved him. So I think it's one of these cases where a decade ago it was acceptable and he was on the edge of acceptability. He's good looking, he gets lots of sex, he attracts beautiful women. Where suddenly it's tipped. Suddenly now in the culture, that's no longer acceptable and we're backdating it.
And I should add, though, there's a lot of allegations that he went too far. He forced himself on people in sexual assault, which he denies, but all of that context is important now. Now, we've talked previously on this very panel about climate anxiety and the effect it's having on kids and the like, and the way it's hyped up way too much. Well, have a listen to the Vice President of the free world and her take on it.
You know, I've heard young leaders talk with me about a term they've coined called climate anxiety. Period. Right? Which is fear of the future and the unknown, of whether it makes sense for you to even think about having children, whether it makes sense for you to think about aspiring to buy a home, because what will this climate be?
Yeah, there you go. She must have been watching Chris Kenny tonight. But, she recognises this, Tanvir, as if this is a problem. She's effectively adding to the anxiety by talking about this anxiety.
Well, that's right. And again, she touches on what we've talked about here, where it's one thing to see climate change as a technical problem, and it's another one to see it as some sort of judgment on the species with this apocalyptic dimension. And she's pretty much given that signal there. That, hey, it's this type of apocalypse. Yeah. But it's also an extension of the extremes of environmentalism where it's almost anti-human. It's anti-human, like the Malthusian idea, we shouldn't reproduce, etc. So that's another extension of the extremes of the climate.
Yeah, just quickly, Claire, she's talking about it, but rather than hitting back at it, she's kind of playing into it.
And just the tone and and the way she says climate anxiety, like we've never heard of it. Yeah, she stretches it out. You know, and then the pause in there, it's like, well, if you haven't had it, you know, up to then, you've got it now. But, you know, I think, thank goodness, that despite the number of children I see that are incredibly anxious about the climate, I still think it's probably still the fringe extreme environmentalists that are giving up being parents over it.
Indeed. Yeah. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Councillors Couch, Claire Rowe and Tanvir Ahmed.